Por favor.
Of course.
Let's get this party going. Yay. Hopped up sugars. Woo! So, I'm very excited as I maniacally rub my hands together. Welcome everyone to YLIJ's March membership meeting about local government and co-hosted by Reimagine Babylon. I want to thank our supporting organization for co-hosting with us. I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. Please, if you have friends that you think would be interested in learning about the island of government that is Long Island, please send them a text with our Zoom link and invite them, have them come. We're going to be talking a lot about basically the mess that is Long Island and all of our different types of governments. And I, your gracious co-host, will be explaining as much as I know about politics and government on Long Island, both Nassau and Suffolk counties. Full disclosure, I am a Nassau County resident. I've done campaigns and politics mainly in Nassau County, as I know a few of you are from Suffolk. I encourage you to correct me if I say the wrong thing about the other county that's doing a lot of things differently, sometimes better than Nassau. But I welcome conversations. This will be, I'm gonna be honest, it's kind of boring because we have so much government, and I'm really gonna try and make it not boring. So hence the reason why I'm like extra today. Hair flip. So I also want to give a shout out to, I want to continuously shout out our members, Collaborative Long Island, and our individual members that helped us create livoters.com. That is that's our main website that has all of the information that I'm going to be talking about tonight, as well as information that you all will be able to use to decipher what is happening in your area of Long Island. John, if you can go to your next slide, please. I do want to get some house rules going. So as we continue our Zoom, I don't think I'm expected to take more than 45 minutes on this portion, maybe less. So I would like to ask everyone to mute themselves, put comments in the chat, any corrections you have or questions that you have, feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to imagine that we've been on Zoom for almost a year, and well, you know, March is the only month that I recognize anymore because it's the month that started us on the hierarchy of Zoom and Google Hangouts and all of that. So if you have questions or you wish to unmute yourself, please feel free to raise your hand, and respect everyone's time and respect everyone's ideas and opinions. And we'll go from there and have a nice, safe space. So the late, great Shirley Chisholm, whose leading words of, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Miss Shirley Chisholm was the first Black woman to run for Congress. Prior to running for Congress, she served as a city council member and a state assembly member, I believe. So this is all, today's meeting is really going to be all about local elections, why they're important, how you can get involved, why you specifically should get involved, and what to expect this 2020 year of the election cycle. Next slide, por favor. I'm going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, as I sat there and told you all to mute yourself. So today's agenda is me doing a presentation, Long Island, the land of government, ta-da, where we all live and suffer under the confusing levels and layers of municipalities and localities in our beautiful island. We will also be hearing from speakers that are activists, elected officials, candidates that are running for office or involved in local elections this election cycle. And then we're going to pair you with more individuals that are candidates, campaign managers, individuals that have run for office in breakout rooms. So you'll be able to have a really comprehensive conversation about how you think you can get involved in this 2020 year of elections. Next slide, please. So why do elections matter? Our first slide with Miss Shirley Chisholm was on, and I explained that she did not just run, her first race was not her congressional race. As much as we all love Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as much as we watch her on Instagram and get the most up-to-date information about what Congress is doing, not everyone can be as great as she is. And sometimes it takes that first step of running for a local office like school board, library board, village board, village trustee, for us to get our foot in the door of feeling comfortable enough in our own leadership to run for office. So these are individuals that represent Long Island currently, and with the exception of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris representing us nationally, each of our elected officials who are at higher federal offices have run for local offices first, most notably Congressmember Tom Suozzi, who was our Nassau County executive, and Congresswoman Kathleen Rice, who was the former Nassau County DA before current DA Madeline Singas. So everyone starts somewhere. And it's really, I want to really emphasize that if you are someone who's interested in politics and government on Long Island, it's important to know that you just start somewhere, learn as much as you can in the area that you're most interested in, whether it be Congress, whether it be county, whether it be your local city or village. Make sure that you understand who represents you, what their interests are, how they relate to you, and how you can be effective in changing what your government representation looks like here on Long Island. Next slide, please. So here is my slide of problematic people. So what's really on this slide is all of the different ways that local government affects Long Island and how we as individuals can interact with it. So me as a Freeport resident, those of you may be familiar with a lot of the actions that I've done as it relates to social and racial justice. I hosted a lot of rallies, candidate forums, and events just centered around recognizing problematic governance in Freeport, how I want to be involved in changing it by finding out who else is running for office and what changes are they interested in making, and also how are they listening to me. Do they take me seriously? Do they take my issues seriously? Do they recognize me not just as, oh, this millennials, shaking things up and she can help us get other millennials. No, this is someone who has real ideas, real concerns for her community. So she's reaching out to us because she has a genuine interest in changing Freeport Village. So local elections are important because they're the first form of government that you immediately interact with when you have to deal with certain issues such as development, housing, roads, taxes. Those main issues happen through your localities. One of the other bigger issues that we had to deal with last year, or one of the more notable issues that occurred last year, was with the town of Hempstead and their use of CARES funding. The CARES funding that the town of Hempstead received was actually COVID funding that was supposed to be shared between the different townships and mainly Nassau County. So the town of Hempstead unfortunately does not have the best track record with money, i.e. they are considerably questionable in their distribution methods. So there was a large issue with how much money they were spending, where they were spending it on. Town of Hempstead chose to take, there was a $74 million grant essentially from the federal government, and they used a considerable amount of it to pay patronage jobs, to pay people who were able to who would vote a certain way, i.e. Republican, and would allow them to maintain jobs, get raises, XYZ. I also have here the Smithtown Fire Department and the Brookhaven Fire Departments. I mention those because most people don't realize that Long Island's a massive forms of government don't only exist between the county, the townships, the cities, and the villages. A lot of people, if you're not in a municipality, if you're not in a village, like if you only live under a township, you have the ability to vote for your sanitation commissioner, vote for your fire commissioner. And most people, because these races are so small and there are so many, a lot of people don't realize or pay attention unless they know someone who works in these specific departments, that this is something that you have to vote for. So I mentioned, Smithtown, and please feel free. I know Suffolk people are here, so feel free to correct me. But Brookhaven, the town of Brookhaven, they had this issue of the Confederate flag, and I kind of want to specify the difference between the two. So Brookhaven had the Confederate flag. Obviously, we know the Confederate flag is racist, and especially New York State was not a part of the Confederacy. So that's just bad education on their part. Hello. But the outrage that came from people wanting to change, people wanting the flag taken off, was not just because that it was historically incorrect and racist, but also in the fact that people were able, there was an election there last year, they had elections as it related to the fire commissioner of the town of Brookhaven. So individuals were calling and speaking to the commissioners that were running for office. What are you going to do about this? Are you going to have this? Are you going to resolve this issue? This is different from the Smithtown Fire Department Thin Blue Line, because first of all, we know that, right. So Kenny said it, the hamlet of Brookhaven is different from the town of Brookhaven. So Smithtown being a town, maybe I flipped the two, but Smithtown being a town, they had the Thin Blue Line on their fire department. This is another fire department where you vote to elect the commissioner. So I want to just emphasize that these local elections, these issues that happen on these hyper local levels, can be changed by our involvement in these elections. So the difficult part of it is finding out when these elections are. Most of, as I understand it, and Skylar, feel free to correct me, but as I understand it, in December, I believe the fire commissioners in Suffolk County are 5-year terms. So the commissioners are there now, but every 5 years a new commissioner will be elected. And I also see Julian from Collaborative Long Island. So feel free to sound off in the chat if that sounds iffy to you. But these commissionerships, they're electable by the people. It's not, you vote for your township, your town council member, and they control who is hired for who becomes commissioner. That's your decision. That's your choice. So these are elections that if YLAJ, as you all know, is hyper active in making sure that we increase our civic engagement. And this includes who's part of our civics, who's a part of our commissioners, our fire commissioner departments, who's running these direct emergency services and emergency direct governments that we interact with on a daily basis. Kenny is saying, from what I know, it's a 3 to 5 year for fire commissioners. He lives in a village, and that's the other thing, because I also live in the village, and the village of Freeport doesn't work like this townships. But we'll get to my case study of who represents me in a little bit. So in Kenny's village, they don't vote for fire commissioners, but we vote for village officials. So we like to make it difficult out here. Yay! Next slide, please. So our problem solver local elected officials. So we have Rockville Center's Gillen, who makes history as the first Democratic Hempstead supervisor. So this was a big deal. We had not had, in the town of Hempstead, we had not had a Democratic supervisor in the township for 100 years. Now, how did that change come about? It was local organizers, people from organizations such as Indivisible, civic organizations, people who wanted the townships to do what they were supposed to do, end patronage jobs, and make sure that the township was doing what the people needed it to do, which was provide proper development and community services to town residents. I also want to add on here that Councilwoman Dorothy Goosby, who, although has some issues doing certain things, I want to acknowledge the history behind her being a town council member. She was not elected until after she won a lawsuit, a civil rights lawsuit, demanding that the township rearrange how they allow African Americans in the town of Hempstead to vote. There was a significant amount of disenfranchisement for African American voters in the town of Hempstead, and she claimed, along with Fred Brewington, who you all might know as one of the founding members of Naacp, the police reform, one of the police reform organizations. The two of them worked together to file a lawsuit successfully against the township to demand that they redraw their district maps of the township and allow proper representation for African Americans. So she advocated to have a township redrawn, the maps of a township redrawn, so that they properly reflected. This is the problem with being on Zoom all the time. You don't properly speak anymore. I'm gonna get it together. Y'all know the sugar, you know how the sugar hits me, and I'm like, woo. Anyways, so Dorothy Goosby was able to file a lawsuit successfully that demanded the change in how town of Hempstead drew their maps and better represented the diversity that was in their community. Actually, there's a line in here that I wanted to read that said, here it is. 11 long years after filing a lawsuit, a federal judge ruled in favor of Goosby, and a year later, Dorothy ran and became the first African-American woman to serve on the Hempstead Town Board. For the past 20 years, Goosby has been reelected by an overwhelming majority. I want to emphasize that this lawsuit was not that long ago. It was 1999. So I want to be very specific that the importance of local elections is there's still so much work that we have to do. I mean, I was born in 93, so she was not even a council member until much after us. Jonathan, don't say that. Most of us weren't alive then. We're not, well, we are all babies compared to her. But I want to emphasize that the importance of us getting involved in these local elections is just this. There's so much opportunity for us to make significant change in how we want to be represented, who we wants to represent us, and how we want to see the future of the island change. As I mentioned before, I know Gooseby she's had to navigate a specific township that unfortunately, when she ran, was really, she's always been a fighter. She's always had to fight. Unfortunately, it's as much as our responsibility as voters, as much as it is hers, to make sure that the positive changes she made back in 1999 maintain up until 2021. And if we are not satisfied with her work, it's our responsibility to give her the opportunity to correct it and or give her an out. Next slide, please. Moving kind of fast. So overall, Long Island's beautiful land of government, these are essentially underneath, federal, state, and underneath federal and state governments. This is kind of what's left. These are the crumbs of the cake that that we really don't pay attention to, but really should. So we have our counties, Suffolk and Nassau. We have the legislature, the comptroller, the clerk, the county executive. The comptroller, clerk, and county executive are part of the administrative branch, the upper level branch. And then you have the legislature, which essentially acts as kind of like a Congress to the executive branch. You have the township, which is our town supervisor and the town council. There is also a town clerk and a town comptroller, depending on where we are. Again, we'll provide you with the information to look up look up who represents you. Some of us have more government representation than we actually know. And last but not least, if you are in a village, which you'll find out later today, there's mayors and trustees. And then there underneath that is the library trustees and the Board of Education, which technically the library and school board are two separate things. But as we get further along, we'll do my case study and I'll be able to show you how all of this interacts. Now, I want to just touch on villages, because if you live in an incorporated area, that's a village. If the area you live in is unincorporated, that's a hamlet. The difference between the two, I'll give you an example. I live in the village of Freeport. And next to me, or I say next to me as if like there's some whole big institution area next to me, but there's Baldwin. Baldwin is a hamlet. So as I better explain, for as I talked about like the fire commissioners and sanitation, the village of Freeport, if I have any issues with sanitation or the fire department, I would be going to my mayor or my village trustees. If I lived in Baldwin, I would be electing my sanitation commissioner and my fire commissioner, and I would just go directly to them if I'm having an issue. See how complicated that gets? LOL. So the next slide, please. So all politics is local. And we talk about this a lot. I know y'all have probably heard me write it in my hashtag on my social media posts or even just talk about it. Getting involved in, social justice and racial work, a lot of it happens at the ground level. There's so much going on in Congress and the federal government, and because it's big and it's flashy and it's all encompassing, we tend to pay more attention to that. But we also forget that the most immediate actions we can take and make have a positive impact on is our local government. I know a lot of you are familiar with YLAJ's participation with Ally United and Naacp. As a steering committee member, we are actively engaged in presenting and helping research the People's Plan, which hopefully all of you have been able to review and have endorsed with either your individual organizations or on your own. But essentially, the People's Plan is a local document. We've been sharing that with local villages and our county. We haven't been sending that to our Congress member. It's really important that we pay attention to our local elections because they tend to affect us greater, more immediately, and much more significantly than we tend to acknowledge. And we compare the two and say, oh, well, if this happens on the federal government level, oh, this is going to suck. Sometimes it takes years for legislation that happens at the federal level, with the exception of those COVID stimmy checks, to affect us individually on the local level. What you will feel the next day is any legislation put forward by your township or your village. That's an immediate change that will happen within the next 24 hours. So it's really important that we acknowledge who is in our local governments, what they stand for, what they're acting on, and how we want to be engaged in changing any improprieties that we don't appreciate. Next slide, please. So who are your representatives? Like, where they at, who they at, what they do? So Erin just dropped in the chat the two links. One is for Nassau County residents, and if you're you'll know if you're a Nassau County resident because you're closer to the city. LOL. If you're on the closer side to the city, you're in Nassau County. If it takes you longer than an hour to get to the city, you're in Suffolk. That's how I don't know if anyone has seen that Newsday Instagram meme of the girl who's like, Nassau County is better because we're closer to the city, and Suffolk County is better because we have castles. So that's how you know the difference too. Have you seen a castle? Yes, you're in Suffolk. Are you 30 minutes from the city? You're in Nassau. So the two links that Erin dropped in the chat, you can use as I'm going over. I would like for you to use as I'm going over my localities. We want you to find your township because we're going to, as we do our breakout groups, we're going to break you up based off of your township. So use those two links and find out, go past federal representatives and state representatives. Find out who your county representation is. Find out who your village and if you live in a city, because sometimes people don't know. So find out who represents you locally and keep track of it. Because what we're going to ask you next is local elections are this year. A lot of them, a good majority of them are happening in March, next week, more specifically. So we want to make sure that you find out who's running for what office in the next year and who's running for office to represent you for next year. And we'd also like to ask, as you're using those links to find out what township you're in, we'd like for you to change your name based off of the number in front of the township. So you're going to add the number of your township to your name. So I am in the town of Hempstead in Nassau, in the Nassau column. So my number I can actually do right now is going to be 12. So when you look on, give me 2 seconds to do it. If you look on your, on my screen, on my speaker screen, it says 12-Kiana Abadi. If I know C. Deanna has done it. She says hers is also 12 because she's in Freeport with me. Yay, buddies. So just go ahead and add the number to your township. And I'd also like to just have Erin, I'm going to copy your link and repost it to the bottom so that people can see it here.
Does everyone know how to rename themselves? Do you like hover over your picture? Okay, we got it. Most people are doing it. If you haven't done it yet, please do it so I can put you in a breakout room later. You hover over your name and there's like ... in the upper right corner and you rename yourself.
There we go. Next slide, please. So here's my case study of who represents me, all 50-11 billion people, LOL. So I live in the village of Freeport. I am in the, when you're talking about your village, your trustees are at large in Freeport. So I have a mayor and 4 trustees. So I vote for the mayor and 2 trustees every, I think, 2 years. So this year is a village election where I'm voting for the mayor and 2 trustees. Next year, I'll be voting for 2 additional trustees. Then there's Freeport School Board. They will be running, my Freeport School Board elections are going to be, I think 2 seats are up this year, and those seats will be up in June. So you have the superintendent. I do not vote on who the superintendent is. I elect the 5 school board members who decide who our superintendent is going to be. Then I have my library board, 5 director and 5 trustees. So the trustees of the library board are not elected. They are appointed by Freeport's school board members. Really complicated. Yeah, we don't, Kenny. Yeah. So yeah, there's not, none of it makes sense. And I'll actually, because I like to double, triple check, from what I went on our website. And again, a lot of this information, if you can't find when the elections are in your locality, you can find it on their website. Yeah, so reading, actually, if I could share my screen really quickly, do I have the ability to do that? Oh, Deanna, can you give me the host ability real quick? Dun, 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 dun. I am the co-host, share screen. So I'm going to share this really quick and then I'll pass it back to you, John. So you guys can actually read right here, and I'll read it out loud for those of you who can't, it might be too small to see. The Freeport Memorial Library Board of Trustees governs the library. The board consists of 5 members of the community appointed by the school board for a term of 5 years. The board members serve on a volunteer basis. The library director is appointed by and responsible to the Board of Trustees for the day-to-day operations of the library. So it sounds like Kenny has something different than what I have, which is, it's kind of, John, you can, I don't know if you're still a co-host, but essentially that's why I say this is real. It's important for us to know individually why all of these municipalities are so important to pay attention to, because they like to pull a fast one on you. So this is my local government is mainly lateral. My village has to interact with the school, and the school has to interact with the library, especially when it comes to budget season. So a lot of, for me, this election cycle, my biggest concern is whoever I vote for to be mayor and trustees, I want them to be able to have a good relationship with my current school board. And whoever I vote for to be school board, I want to make sure they know who they're electing to the library board, because I want to be, I like going to the library. I like still going to the library. Freeport has a very nice library. So I want to make sure that as I'm paying attention, I am creating the government I want to see, and I want my government to function. And because I want my government to function, I want to only elect people who are going to be nice and commingle well with my other layers of government. And I'm going to speed through this part quickly because I know we still have to get to our speakers. Township, you have the town supervisor and 6 town council members. Freeport has 2. Freeport frequently, and you all have heard me say this, Freeport's a third, becoming more diverse. Our Hispanic population is flourishing. And we have, because of that, Freeport tends to get divided in half, pretty much on the Sunrise Highway line. So we have 2 council members. One of them is Dorothy Goosby. And the other one is late Aaron King Sweeney. I now have this guy, Chris Carini. Do with that what you will. Next slide, please. So, and lastly, my case study continued. My county, so we have our county executive, comptroller, county clerk, 19 legislators in Nassau County. I believe Suffolk County has just like 3 less, I think 16. I don't know. Freeport is split and has 3 county legislators. You've got Steve Rhodes, who represents the Freeport Merrick side. You've got legislator Deborah Muley, who represents more South Freeport, but she represents the largest portion of Freeport. And then you have legislator Kavan Abrahams, who represents the northern part of Freeport by Merrick, Meadowbrook, by the Meadowbrook Highway. So those are all of our representations. State, we are also still split. We've got 2 assembly members, 1 senator. Our northern assembly member is Taylor Rayner, and our southern assembly member is Judy Griffin. I also want to acknowledge that the way that our representation in Freeport is split up is pretty racially divided. As diverse as Freeport is, in the beginning, in the beginning, Freeport was mostly Black and white. So North Freeport was where the Black population is, hence why Kavan, Dorothy, and Taylor Rayner were its representation. Southern Freeport is where a large white population tends to live, hence Judy Griffin, Deborah Muley, Steve Rhodes, and who else? Chris Carini. So I want to acknowledge that, again, it's important to pay attention to your local elections, because it always ties in, and unfortunately it's Long Island and sometimes things are racist, so just kind of, deal with that as you will. And then of course our federal government, Congress, Senate President. Thankfully we only have 1 Congress member. We're not split up along racial lines, but the 1 Congress member that represents Freeport also represents a good majority of Nassau County, which, we can get to later. Next slide, please. So these are Long Island elections that you can pay, that we want you to kind of be cognizant of. This is all happening 2021. I don't really have time to go over all of this. I want to kind of speed ahead, but essentially, as we ask you to find out who represents you, we'll be able to find out when those elections are. Again, local elections, a lot of them tend to happen on the off years. And I say off years because we very rarely do local elections overlap when federal elections are coming. Because, federal elections, when you're voting for the president, it's every 4 years. When you're voting for Congress, it's every 2. But sometimes that overlap, people tend to vote more when the president is running for office, not just Congress. People tend to vote more when the governor is running for office. That will be this year. So, and LOL, Andrew Cuomo's having a hard time this year. Anyways, so next slide, please. Please make sure that you pay attention and use livevoters.com. Yay! See how I did that transition though? To find out what elections are going to be occurring this year for you and the areas that represent you. So village elections, as I mentioned, Freeport Village is going to be Tuesday, March 16th. A large majority of villages in Long Island are going to be up this year. So please make sure you're paying attention. Or, as I also mentioned, my school board elections are going to be in June. So please make sure you use livevoters.com to find out the upcoming elections, when those are going to be, and who's running. We really want to make sure that you know who's running for all of these different village races so that we can find out how to get better involved. And, you might be picking the worst of 2 bad apples. That's a played out analogy. You might be picking the worst of 2 bad apples, but one of them might be the transition you need to get a better greener tree that you want to have for longer term and better living opportunities. Because I know we all know that we're trying to make so many changes out here on Long Island. Next slide, please. So final 2 slides for me. Next steps for you, reiterating again, go to www.livoters.com to find out who is running in your district, whether it be village, if you live in a village, your township, your county, find out who is running to represent you. Most candidates have websites, Facebook, social media, especially now that a lot of people are running and it's COVID. So they can't do the regular door knocking. So you might not be getting palm cards. You might be getting mailers, but we want to make sure that you're paying attention to who's running in your district. Babylon, our good friends at Reimagine Babylon are supporting Debbie Maya Mileto for Babylon Trustee. So you can sign up. There will be a link in the chat to drop off postcards to help get her, to help our partners Reimagine Babylon get her elected. Redistricting, I'm going to shrink this one up, but redistricting, after we filled out the census, I know we all, this group hopefully is familiar, but just to reiterate, redistricting happens after the census is taken, and it essentially redraws district maps, electoral maps. So this training is it's a 6-day training. It's a 6-session, 2-hour training. The first training was yesterday, last night, and it basically was just an overview of what the census is, how the data is collected, what that data is used for, and how it will be used in terms of redistricting. So there are 5 more sessions that you all can sign up for. And we hope that you all will be able to learn some really good information, because redistricting in Long Island is going to be crucial because we only have 1 congressional seat as it is. Last but not least, Freeport. Myles and I are going to be hosting a bunch of events this weekend, especially as it relates to GOTB. I will let him talk about that, as he's one of our speakers this evening, Myles Hollingsworth from the Freeport Roosevelt NAACP youth branch. So hopefully we will drop more information into the chat for you guys to join that. Next slide, please. Awesome. Last thing, support the People's Plan. I know a lot of you have already been a part of our outreach and our sessions and really involved in us getting the People's Plan into a document that's going to be shared in both Nassau and Suffolk County. So please, please, please make sure that you go to our website here, www.liunited.org/the-peoples-plan. Jonathan, if you're able to click that link just to show people what the website looks like. If you go to our website, we would love for y'all to endorse the People's Plan, find out the different police reform ideas that the candidates that are running for this local elections are supporting. And we're trying to flyer the community to get more community local support for the People's Plan so that people can call their county elected officials. So use that website, go to the link, sign up and endorse the People's Plan as yourself. You can sign up and endorse as your organization. We really want to try and get as much support for the People's Plan as possible, because we still have the next 2-3 weeks to really, it's crunch time for us. So we want to push the People's Plan as much as we can in Nassau and Suffolk County so that it's passed and made into law. Yeah. And next slide. I think we are at our speakers. Yeah. I think so. Yes. Fabulous. Oh, really quickly. So, yeah, that's it. So transitioning now to our beautiful speakers, our great people. We have Myles Hollingsworth, who is the president of the Freeport NAACP Roosevelt branch. Hi, Myles. Nice to see you. Wave to the camera, Myles. With more oomph. We also have joining us Kenny. I don't see. Oh, there he is. Kenny St. John, who is joining us. I believe. Where are you joining us from, Kenny? You're part of an organization, right?
Well, I'm on the Lindenhurst Library Board, so
there
I'm a
you go.
trustee.
Yes, one of our library board members. Hence the reason why you were like, "That's crazy." Yeah, no, I get it. And last but not least, we will have Anthony Torres, who is a co-founder of Reimagine Babylon. The gents are in the house tonight. Yay!
Really quickly before we get there, can we just take a group photo? If everyone can like put on their camera.
Okay. Let me get this one curl that I have left until I wash my hair.
Okay, ready? Is everyone ready? Okay, ready? Okay, 1, 2, big smile. Look at the second page. You got it. Thanks.
Okay. I'm glad you asked this time, because sometimes you just take photos and then we're all like blinking and doing dirt faces.
Hey, listen, Photoshop at your own risk. So 3 gentlemen that are joining us for this evening, I want to thank all of you for participating. I would like to start actually with Anthony. So what I'd like to ask all 3 of you to do is, as I call on you, give us, your name, where you are, what organization you're from, and just brief overview of what your main focus of this upcoming election is going to be. So, Anthony, if you could please.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you all. Thanks for having me. Anthony Torres, he, him. I grew up in Babylon Village and am a founder of Reimagine Babylon. And our priority in this election, just a couple of days away, is to replace one of the seats on our Board of Trustees in the village with Debbie Maya Melito, who is actually the mother of a high school friend of mine in Babylon, and who would be a real progressive champion who would work with Reimagine and our allies in the village to make our community a place where everyone truly belongs, no matter our color or origin, and really could be a historic change in a community that, as we talked about in this just tonight, and as I'm sure you've all talked a lot about around the segregation of Long Island, and for Babylon Village, a community that has been fairly exclusive and has been one where the electorate itself is 94% white. So, but even with that, it actually is a purple in terms of voting. It votes purple, fairly switches side to, between them. So if we can win a race forward progressive race here in Babylon Village, it won't just make a difference for the solutions and policies we can put in place for our people here. It could also really be a huge marker for where we, how we contest for power across Long Island.
I have been informed that I went out of order. So I am going to ask Kenny St. John, who is our library board member, to come and talk to us.
Sounds good. Thank you, Kiana, for setting this up. Also want to extend my thanks to Deanna and Erin, just our back and forths leading up to tonight. Hi, everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kenneth St. John. I'm 28 years old. I'm from Lindenhurst. I currently serve on the Lindenhurst Library Board of Trustees. I've been on the board for approximately 2 years now. My day job, my 9 to 5, I'm an attorney. I work in the labor relations department for New York City Transit. Part of that, I was in private practice for about 3 years. So where did it all begin? Oh, you can't see me? I don't know. Oh, here we go.
If everyone can change their view maybe to gallery view, that would be, then you'd see the speaker.
Oh no, I put a spotlight on whoever is speaking and I just forgot to change it, sorry.
All good. Okay, so back in 2016, I actually ran for mayor of Lindenhurst Village. I was 23. I ran as an independent candidate, just how W. Melito is running now. Reimagine Babylon is her independent party. I ran on an independent line as well called Restore Lindy. At the time, Lindenhurst Village's downtown was in honestly a complete disarray. The village government was very unresponsive to the residents. And Lindenhurst is one of the only villages, I think the only village in Suffolk County that still has partisan elections. Most villages, I think Nassau too included, they have independent parties running. It could be a mixture of Democrats or Republicans. You'll never see that. But in Lindenhurst, the Republicans control. It is I wouldn't call it the most conservative town, but it is fairly. I would say it's fairly conservative. So I ran on an independent ballot line. Democrats decided to not only sit it out, but also to back the Republicans in that race. And I think that Debbie's dealing with a similar issue right now with the incumbents that I believe are Republicans that are running on an independent line that are being backed by the town Democrats. And I'm sure that Anthony could speak more to that. So I ran the race on downtown revitalization.
Kenny, can you repeat that? Because I think it's very important. So you're saying that at a village level, right? Clarify for me, people don't run on Democratic Republican line. They usually run on some weird made up party called like Lindenhurst in the future or the People for Babylon or something like that, right?
99% of the time that's correct, only because Lindenhurst allows for partisan elections, but most other villages will have like some like random local name that they'll run on.
And however, these people are Democrats or Republicans, right? No matter what weird made up name they make for themselves, they are Democrat or Republicans, and they will probably govern what those philosophies. So what you just said is that in what village are the Republicans running and the Democratic establishment is backing them?
So that's both in Lindenhurst and Babylon.
Right. So do you understand what we're up against here, guys? It's not just that we have to be more engaged. We also have to fight against the Democrats that are empowering the conservatives, right? So this is why we need you all to run and us all to pay more attention. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Sure. But just building off of that, I mean, just because your village mayor happens to be a Republican doesn't necessarily make that person going to be governing like a Republican. There are popular Republican mayors that have Republican registration that get cross-party support. If they're just focusing on local issues and focus on constituent services, that's great. So for instance, tonight, I actually had a conversation with the mayor of Lindenhurst, not the guy I ran against, but he's a good friend of mine. I went to high school with his daughter, and we were talking about a constituent business issue that I wanted to bring to his attention. It was great. I know he's going to take care of what needs to be taken care of. But in my particular experience, his predecessor is the one that I ran against. And he had the backing of the Democratic establishment in that race. And I've seen it happen in other races too within the town of Babylon. So my race was focused really on local issues: downtown revitalization, freezing property taxes, constituent services, actually having a Facebook page for the village of Lindenhurst, having public access, televised board meetings. I mean, a lot of these reforms, posting the budget online even, the village website didn't even have that. So a lot of the transparency stuff, even if you lose, which I did, I got like a third of the vote running independent just on my own name alone. It puts ideas in a lot of people's minds, and it spurs the establishment to actually make meaningful reforms. So 2 years ago, I ran for library trustee. I won. I unseated an incumbent, and I ran on somewhat similar issues, but you focus on the job that the voters are electing you to do. So for instance, for the library, I was focusing on passing the infrastructure bond that failed a couple of years prior. I was focusing on passing an infrastructure bond that was going to be a little bit lower cost-wise. The bond they first proposed was like $15 million to renovate the building, to expand it, to put ADA compliant bathrooms and elevators. So some things that like you really don't think about it until like, if you have an elderly aunt or a grandmother that can't get around the building. So it was definitely much needed upgrades. We got the bond passed about 6 months after I was elected. That was a public referendum. It was a $9.4 million bond with like $500,000 in capital improvements. Exactly, Erin. Accessibility for all. And because of my labor and employment background, the board values my insight in terms of how to structure certain policies. I'm on the policy committee for the library in addition to strategic planning. So it's also really important to, I guess my advice to you all is think about what you want to do outside of politics. It could be related to politics, but that gives you a lot of credibility. when you run for an elected office. I felt like I had a lot more credibility running for library trustee with a couple years as a practicing attorney as opposed to being a law student when I ran for mayor at 23. There's a big, big, big difference there. And I'm sure Skylar, I know Skylar's on. Skylar and I haven't really had the chance to talk, but I know he could probably speak to that similar experience when he ran for state senate. The second piece of advice I want to give you is you have to love what you do. Like, I love being a library trustee. It's an unpaid job, but that's honestly, that's where you show with, that's really where you're able to find where the real passion lies. Really, especially during COVID, that was real like crisis, probably the biggest crisis most elected officials on a local level are going to have to face. And we were very proactive, implementing a COVID health emergency policy about 5 days before it hit. Just when like we saw the wave coming, and we instituted certain protocols for staff leave when the library should shut down during this whole time. There's been fits and starts obviously over the past year, that we gave a lot of power to the library director to make a call on the ground, to ascertain whether the library would be safe for patrons and staff. That sort of experience, really providing those services to the community, that's something you really have to be passionate about. Don't go looking for the next step. Like I don't know what's in my future in terms of running for office again. You just have to love what you do. That's the one thing I would say is my criticism of certain elected officials, is like they keep looking for the next step. No, you have to be happy where you are. You have to be happy in the job that the people elected you to do, and do it to the best of your ability, and be happy that you're in it. It's a privilege. It's a pleasure. It's something that you should take honor and pride in. So that's all I have, at least my little spiel. But I'd be happy to answer any questions, whether in a breakout session or privately. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kenny. Really appreciate it. I believe our next speaker is Myles, and I know he ran to go and get his charger, but he's back. Awesome. Myles,
Great.
come and chat with us.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Myles Hollingsworth. As you heard Kiana speak about a little bit in the beginning, I serve as president of the NAACP Freeport Roosevelt Youth, where our goal is to ensure the social, political, and educational rights of all people, while simultaneously building new leadership amongst the youth. Whether that be engaging in government of any level, engaging in schools, or just general good old community events, we make sure our mission is accomplished while incorporating the youth of the community. And I'm grateful to serve as president of that. I was invited on this call to speak about my experience as a 16-year-old, heavily involved in local government and the events that I've planned in Freeport, New York, where I am a resident of. My pronouns are he, him, his, by the way, if I didn't say that already. In Freeport, New York, in Nassau County, I've been doing a lot of work to make sure that the village of Freeport is ready and able to jump on our village of Freeport elections. Last month, along with Kiana Body, steering committee member, we hosted the Freeport Mayoral Candidates Forum. And what that entailed was generally millennial and Gen Zs being able to ask their almost elected officials questions that pertain to them in the millennial and Gen Z world. And there's a stark difference there that I wanted to highlight. Even some members on my executive team didn't believe it, but I had to do a little convincing. My whole point was to make sure that the youth, and when I say youth, I don't mean like, 15 and younger. I mean people who are like under the age of 35, because they are so young and they're coming back from college or coming back from say law school or a second degree, and they're trying to make Freeport the home of their new business, maybe their actual new home, and have kids in the school district. That all evolves around local government. And a good point that I'd like to mention that I heard from Mr. St. John, that I like to say it's good ordinance, is that you really get to see how all of these candidates are, how involved in they are and the real passion that they have for these offices. He mentioned, you see that with him in library trustee, even just hearing him speak for the last 3 minutes or so, you really saw the passion behind it. And that was my intention with this candidates forum in Freeport. We met with the Alliance for Freeport team and We the People, headed by Carmen Pinheiro and Thelma Lambert-Watkins. And our point was to really not expose, but definitely detail and outline each and every characteristic that we could find about those candidates through different questions. Topics included housing, education, fiscal policy, race relations, and regular forum questions that you see all around. And our point was to spread out the candidates because you see them in all these other forums. I'm not going to mention them because you may have heard about how crazy they've gone on in Freeport, but these other forums really are just shouting random questions that people have from decades ago at these candidates, and it's not effective at all. And so it was really important to me as a 16-year-old, and as it should be to everyone who's involving themselves in local elections, to get involved, ask those hard questions, and spread their candidates out. A lot of times, Kiana and I found ourselves having to follow up with questions to these candidates because rather they didn't answer it well enough or they completely dodged it. We were making sure that these questions were answered. I'm very proud to say that I don't believe not one question had gone unanswered. We looked for special responses that not only answered the question, but provided insight into the candidate's character. For example, I'm going to shout out not in any special way, Tiffany Pendola, who's running with We the People team. A point that I'd like to mention that she raised was how flexible she would be in all of her politics that she engaged in as village trustee. She's running for trustee. And that was something that you look for in a candidate. She happened to display it. The people on the call saw it, and I saw it, Kiana saw it. That's what we were looking for in a candidate. That's what everyone should be looking for in a candidate. We were making sure that the people who attended that call and the people of Freeport knew, here's what candidates look like. Here's what candidates who affiliate as Democrat or maybe conservative in some random way. I believe it was Ziana who mentioned that these candidates run on these weird parties. You heard me mention Alliance for Freeport and We the People. That's not Democrat or Republican, but these individuals are Democrat or Republican. And the point is to pinpoint them on that scale. So we asked all those questions to make sure that they, showed themselves in that light in some way. Back to Tiffany Pendola, she was speaking about the flexibility and communication that was needed in a candidate rather than herself as like, oh, I'll do this for you, or I'll do this, which is a little bit of what you should be doing as a politician and running for office. But she was able to convey to us what she was looking for in a candidate and why that candidate happened to be herself. And that's what Kiana and I really tried to do for this forum. So it's what to pay attention to and also why it's important. Everyone on this call tonight is stressing to you why local elections are so important and how some of these local officials go on, I saw it in the comments, go on to higher office and we don't like them here. If we don't like them here, we need to do something about it. And so they don't get up there where their power and influence is a little bit more heavy. That's really the point, and that's what we definitely needed to have all the people in the audience observe, why we are stressing local elections and why these candidates needed to answer all these hard questions. I'll say one of them, which was one of my favorites about Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 203. How successful do you believe the response was that Freeport is working on, and what would have been different in your administration? Right there off the bat, anyone who may seem sort of Republican, we know how Republicans are, would have said, it wasn't needed, or it's working really well. The police are working really well. What we heard and what we were trying to let the people in the audience hear is that we're looking for a gray area. We're not looking for, yes, we're for the police. What they're doing right now is an attack on the police, but we're also not looking for somebody who's saying, I don't know anything about the police. I'm pushing this out. The point was to really make sure that these people had good insight into all aspects that were being in politics. More specifically, we mean how they're responding to these questions. And I spoke to Aaron Curley about it a while before this call, about how these candidates care in what they're doing. It's really important how these candidates behave and react to the people of the community, whether it be a handshake outside of an event or something like that. That's how you get to interact with your candidates. Kiana and I really wanted to stress that communication, that bond, That's how it's supposed to be in local elections. You're supposed to be familiar with your candidates. I know everyone watches those old TV shows where you see how all those people just walk into the mayor's office and say, I'm going to the mayor's office. Right now, if I had a problem, going to the mayor's office is nearly impossible. Yes, you can set up an appointment. Yes, it's COVID and all this, but it's the fact, do they want to see you? Do they want to hear what's coming out of your mouth? That was the point that we wanted to highlight in each of these candidates. And I think we did a very successful job in doing so. My experience in all of this really is, wow, I really liked it. It's really interesting and I can't wait for other people to get into it. And then I have other people looking at me and saying, well, he's 16, he's so young, he can't be in this. I guarantee you that it's important and relevant that 16-year-olds get involved. Erin and I were talking that it's important because school districts, we have housing. When I go to college and I come back, do I want to buy a house in Freeport? How is that going to look? And that all revolves around local elections. We are asking those questions now because we're going to have to deal with them later. How we involved other youth in the community, at least with my team, I know, we made sure that they had the contact information from all of these candidates. What I was saying before is about how all of these candidates react. Sorry, I don't know if you can still see me. I changed screens. How all these candidates react to us. We were looking at how they responded to these questions, whether they were aggressive in their interaction, whether they give a long or short response. That all encapsulates what a good candidate is. Kenny again was mentioning the passion about these candidates. You can see how these candidates reacted. Again, in no specific way, I'm going to highlight a response that we got from Thelma, who's running for mayor, and how aggressive she attacked the Black Lives Matter and race relations issues. We know what happened in Freeport with our current administration. We know how that's going on with police. That passion that came in some responses, but did not come in some responses, is what we highlighted in follow-up emails. This is what you need to look for in a candidate, or this is why your candidate is not doing what they're doing for you. I almost want to call it like how to be a candidate 101. We were really looking at it and how to show the people like, yes, this is candidacy. This is the stuff that you want to see on a national and federal level. That was what Kiana and I were really working towards, and I believe we got it. We highlighted these candidates in a truly unique fashion that allowed them to display all their policy and agendas, all that they had out to the people that focused towards millennial and Gen Z. But at the same time, we were able to allow the people of Freeport a chance to ask all their amazing questions. It was so expansive and so amazing. I love the experience. But yeah, I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm going to quick wrap up and say that it was a great experience. Any questions, I'll put my email in the chat and you guys can do whatever. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Myles. It was a pleasure to work with you. And I want to thank all three of our speakers. Anthony, I just want to make sure that you did get to do everything that you were asked to speak on and everything that was of interest or note for you to discuss before we go into our breakout rooms.
Yeah, Anthony, I think Kiana had me steal your thunder a little bit, so.
Not at all. I let me see. I think something I was reflecting on before, and I think just changing the gallery, is, and something that when we were approaching this campaign and this election in Babylon, this, as other speakers talked about, this all came from somewhere, right? Myself and others have wanted where we grew up to be different for a very long time. And this past year with the pandemic, the protests, the national elections created an opportunity for us to do something that has never really been done in Babylon. And the lesson from that, and the thing I'm talking about, isn't necessarily just running a progressive for office. What it is actually building an organized base of people who can actually leverage their votes for power and policy. Here in the village, there are like we know there are progressives. Most of them are registered Democrats. They're like, are families like mine, families of color in this community? Nobody's talking to them. There's like no organizing happening. I just remember a few months ago when the protests started across the island, across the country, I was visiting family, and I was like, I mean, oh, it's happening here also, but there's no infrastructure. There's like no, like what are people being funneled into? How are we going to sustain this energy here? What are people going to campaign on? What?
So may I interrupt you there only briefly? So that idea of how to sustain and how to continue that energy, I feel like you all being able to be here tonight, right now, is you all helping to sustain this energy. Like, how many of you knew this time last year that there are normally elections in March? Like, I honestly didn't know. Like, that in itself is a small success. That in itself is an achievement. So just because I kind of knew the direction that you're going, Anthony, that's the only reason I wanted to stop you there. And I think this might be a really great moment to be able to let everybody get a chance to meet each other. We're all broken up into our little numbered groups. I'm Town of Oyster Bay. I look forward to speaking to other Town of Oyster Bay people. And Deanna, I know you have our leading question, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Deanna. I'm 28, she, her. Actually, I'm 27. Sorry, 2 weeks, 28. I'm from Rockwell Center in Freeport now. I just want to touch on what Anthony said. We have to understand that there's a few things, right? We have to build the base. For people who don't know what that means that for any change, you have to have a group of people that are actually going to take action or vote for that person if we run someone for office. Now, how does that happen? It happens through meetings like this. And when Anthony says that there was no infrastructure, he's 100% true. The Democratic Party has no infrastructure, right? If it did, we wouldn't be in such a pathetic state that we are now. So what grassroots group like us, Young Law for Justice, NAACP, Reimagine Babylon, what we're trying to do is have a place for you to go to channel that energy and sustain it. And we're actually going to talk about that in the breakout rooms. We really want to hear from you about what you think these meetings should be, right? Like, we get together, we plan the agenda, we have our ideas of what information we think people should know. But at the end of the day, people want to come to meetings for their own reasons, and we want to know that. So I'm going to drop in the chat right now a few questions. And then we're going to go into our breakout rooms. So let me just drop it in the chat so everyone has it. And because of the turnout, I had to combine some townships. So if I asked you to be a moderator, there might be more than one moderator in your room. So in the first room, we're going to have, we have Ezekiel and Skylar and Dylan are all the moderators. So you guys can just figure that out. In the next room, we have Kenny and Anthony. That's the Babylon room. And also Hunter Gross from Huntington. He's running for town council. And then Oyster Bay will have Aaron. And then in 12 and 13, Hempstead and North Hempstead will have Kiana be the moderator there. So when we go and break out to our rooms, everyone please go around, introduce yourself, where you're from. Let's talk about upcoming local elections, but really let's talk about how we can make these meetings more engaging and how we can increase turnout and make them more interesting and get young people to care about local elections and just in general politics, right? How many people protested last summer, but then how many people are gonna keep and vote and keep this year organizing? Okay, we're gonna open the room. So it's 9:13 now. We're gonna have a hard stop at 9:28. So I will be closing the rooms then, okay? Thank you.
Bye.